You ever feel like the people you love the most are just using you? 5 years. That's how long I paid my parents' bills, rent, groceries, car insurance, you name it. Every month, on time, no questions asked. They never said thank you. Never asked how I was doing. Just expected the money like clockwork. And I gave it, because that's what good sons do, right? I thought I was being a good son. Until one night, one single night, I asked for something back. Just a favor. One night of babysitting so my wife and I could manage a last-minute emergency. And my mom, she laughed. Not a chuckle, not a nervous laugh, she looked me in the eye and said, "We're not your servants." That was the moment everything unraveled. Because later that same night, I learned something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. A truth so twisted, it made my stomach turn. What I didn't realize then, was that this wasn't just about money. It never was. This was about power, control, and a family secret they never thought I'd uncover. And once I saw it for what it was, I did something I never thought I'd do. I cut my own parents off. And I don't regret it. If this story hit home, drop a 1 in the comments. Subscribe, share, and help us break the silence, one truth at a time. Thanks for being here. I grew up in a 2-bedroom house in a dusty suburb just outside Tacoma. My parents weren't bad people, not in the way people usually mean that. They were just tired. Always tired. Tired from work, tired from bills, tired of each other. My dad was a warehouse foreman who got injured on the job when I was 12 and never really recovered, physically or mentally. My mom cleaned houses and watched way too much daytime TV. They didn't drink, didn't cheat, didn't scream at each other. But they also didn't show affection unless it was on holidays or in front of other people. I learned early that survival in our house meant keeping my head down and pulling my weight. I washed dishes by the time I was 7, mowed the lawn at 9, and started bagging groceries after school at 15. It wasn't punishment. It was just how things were. You don't ask for help, you figure it out. So I did. I clawed my way into college with scholarships and night shifts. Studied computer science while working the help desk. By 27, I had moved to Seattle and landed a solid job at a software company. I built something from nothing. And part of me thought, maybe now, finally, they'll be proud. Maybe now I'll earn a real place in this family. But there was one problem with that logic. Rachel. My older sister, 3 years ahead of me in age, and a decade behind me in responsibility. Rachel has never held a job for more than 6 months. She's an artist, which mostly means she burns through hobbies, credit cards, and breakups like it's an Olympic sport. Every time she crashed her car or maxed out a store card, my parents would swoop in like it was an emergency. They treated her like a delicate, misunderstood genius who just needed a little more time to find her path. She was the golden child. Still is. When I got promoted. That's nice, but Rachel's been painting again. She's so creative. When Jessica, my wife, got pregnant, and we announced it over dinner, my mom said, "Oh, but Rachel's been feeling really down lately, maybe don't tell her until she's in a better place." Jessica saw it before I did. The way my parents would cancel plans with us last minute if Rachel needed emotional support. How they'd gush about her online, but forget to acknowledge my birthday. At first, I brushed it off. "They're just trying to keep the peace," I said. But peace, I'd come to learn, was code for don't rock Rachel's boat. Still, I paid the bills. Quietly. Consistently. It started with a little help after my dad's back surgery, just a few months of rent. Then their car needed repairs. Then they said they were behind on utilities. The excuses were always framed in soft guilt. We just need help getting back on our feet, or it's so amazing to see our son do so well. Eventually, they stopped asking. The payments became automatic. Every first of the month, a quiet withdrawal from my account, rent, groceries, car insurance, even a few of Rachel's credit card balances by accident. Jessica asked once, "Do they ever thank you?" I didn't know what to say. I told myself it was love. That supporting your parents was just part of growing up. That maybe one day they'd look at me the way they looked at Rachel. But deep down, I knew the truth. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me because I was useful. And when that use ran out, they'd move on. It was a Tuesday when everything started to fall apart. Jessica had just been assigned a last-minute business trip to San Diego, one of those overnight leadership retreats where they stuff 3 days' worth of meetings into 24 hours. She was stressed, apologetic, and already juggling our daughter Lila's daycare pickup while reviewing slides for a panel she hadn't even agreed to speak on. Meanwhile, I had a product demo scheduled for the next morning. My team had been working on it for 3 months. The timing couldn't have been worse. So I made a phone call I hadn't made in years, not to ask for money, not to offer help, but just to ask for one simple favor. "Hey, Mom. Can you and Dad watch Lila tomorrow night? Just one night. Jessica's got a work trip and I'll be at the office late. I'll drop her off, pick her up early. No big deal." There was silence on the other end. Then a short laugh, sharp and casual, like I'd just asked her to shovel snow off my roof in July. "Oh, Brandon," she said, amusement dripping from her voice. "We're not your babysitters. We raised our kids already." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. I'm not asking you to raise her. Just one night. She goes to bed by 7. "No," she cut in, still laughing. "Ask Rachel. Isn't she the one with all the free time?" I sat there, phone still to my ear, listening to nothing but the dial tone. I hadn't realized she'd hung up. I didn't tell Jessica right away. What was I supposed to say, that my own mother laughed in my face when I asked for help with her granddaughter? Instead, I picked up a small box of pastries from our favorite bakery. Stupid, maybe, but I wanted to at least show some appreciation for her taking my call, even if the answer was no. I drove to their place around 8:30 that night. The porch light was on. I heard laughter before I even knocked. High-pitched giggles. Children's voices. I stepped closer to the door, listening again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I knocked. Lightly. No answer. So I tried the handle. It was unlocked. Inside, the living room was lit up like a Christmas movie. There was popcorn on the table, cartoons playing quietly in the background, and 2 small children, Rachel's kids, snuggled under blankets on the couch. My mom walked in from the kitchen holding juice boxes. She froze when she saw me. "Brandon," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" I looked at the kids. Then back at her. "You're babysitting?" She shifted uncomfortably. "It's different. Rachel had a really bad migraine." My dad appeared behind her, scratching his head. "She just needed a break. You know how sensitive Rachel gets." I didn't say a word. Didn't shout. Didn't argue. I just looked at them. And for the first time in my life, I saw them for exactly who they were. The next morning, I didn't call. I didn't send a text. I just got in the car and drove. My hands were steady on the wheel, but something in my chest buzzed like a live wire. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say. I just knew I needed to look them in the eye and hear whatever excuse they were going to serve. When I knocked on the door, my dad opened it like I was a stranger. "Brandon," he said, blinking like I wasn't supposed to exist outside a screen. I walked past him without waiting for permission. My mom was sitting on the couch, flipping through her phone. She didn't even flinch. "I just want to make sure I heard you right," I said. "You can't babysit your granddaughter for one night because you're not my servants. But you watched Rachel's kids last night because she had a headache?" She sighed like I was asking about something trivial. "Brandon, why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Before I could answer, I heard her. "Rachel." She sauntered into the hallway wearing one of my dad's old college sweatshirts like she'd just woken up from a spa weekend. She stretched, looked at me, and groaned. Oh my God. Are you seriously throwing a tantrum right now? I turned to her, jaw clenched. She folded her arms, leaned against the wall. You act like paying a few bills makes you a saint. Maybe if you weren't so uptight all the time, Mom and Dad wouldn't have to pick favorites. Something in me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't grief. It was clarity. Cold and pure. Like ice water poured over a fire that had been burning too long. I looked at all three of them, my mother trying not to look guilty, my dad rubbing his temples, Rachel smirking like this was some sick joke, and I understood. They didn't love me. They loved what I could do for them. And that wasn't the same thing. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just nodded, turned around, and walked out. The drive home felt different. Quiet, but sharp. Like every sound outside the window had finally made room for my thoughts. Back at the house, Jessica was on a Zoom call. I kissed her on the head, sat at my desk, and opened my bank account. Canceled the autopay on their rent. Removed the payment schedule for their utilities. Shut down the recurring transfer to their car insurance. I stared at the screen for a moment, then picked up my phone. Typed a message, short, clean, final. You're on your own now. Figure it out. I hit send. Then I blocked my mom. Blocked my dad. Blocked Rachel. Phone silent. Mind loud. I wasn't angry anymore. Not even disappointed. I was done. I didn't expect silence forever, not from them. But I also didn't expect the first shot to be fired on Facebook. 2 days after I cut them off, I got a text from my cousin Aaron. Hey, have you seen your mom's post? I'm so sorry. I opened the link and stared at the screen. There it was, a long, dramatic status from my mother, written in the voice of a wounded saint. It breaks my heart to say this, it began, but sometimes, the people you love the most turn their back on you when you need them the most. Our daughter, yes, the one we raised, fed, and loved unconditionally, has abandoned us completely. After everything we've done for her, she's decided we're not good enough anymore. The rest was a masterclass in public manipulation. She painted me as selfish. Cold. Someone whose success had gone to his head. She made it sound like I'd thrown my elderly, suffering parents into the street over a minor disagreement. The comments poured in like acid rain. So sorry, Sharon, you deserve better. Some kids just don't appreciate their parents anymore. Karma will catch up with her. Her. I blinked, scrolled back. Wait, her? I read it again. Our daughter. It wasn't just one line. The entire post referred to me as she, her, our girl. At first, I thought it was a typo, until I realized exactly what had happened. She had copied and pasted an old post she once wrote about Rachel, back when they had a falling out about something stupid, probably money. She just swapped a few sentences and recycled the same guilt-drenched speech, but forgot to change the gender references. I almost laughed. Almost. Because in that moment, the truth hit harder than any insult ever could. This wasn't even about me. Not really. It was about control. And I had just taken that away. Rachel, of course, jumped in with the grace of a crowbar. I never wanted to say anything before, she wrote in the comments, but honestly, I always knew Brandon only cared about himself. Mom and Dad gave him everything, and this is how he repays them? Disgusting. More comments followed. People I hadn't spoken to in years chimed in, parroting their side, offering pity to the wrong people. I could feel my fingers hovering above the screen, wanting to type something, anything. But I didn't. Instead, I sat back and let the fire burn. Let them spiral. I didn't comment. I didn't message anyone. I didn't defend myself. Because I didn't need to. That post, full of emotional bait and sloppy lies, said more about them than it ever could about me. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Not the lies. Not even the public betrayal. What stung the most was realizing how easily I had been replaced. Not just forgotten. Rewritten. One minute I was their beloved provider. The next, I was a villain in someone else's copy-pasted story. So I stayed quiet and watched the storm I refused to be part of, gathering on a screen I no longer needed to answer. I held off for as long as I could. For days, I watched my name get dragged through the mud by people who'd never once texted me on my birthday. I let the guilt trap post marinate, let Rachel fan the flames with her smug little jabs, let people whisper their versions of a story they didn't even know. And then, one night, I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and started typing. I didn't rant. I didn't insult. I just told the truth. For the past 5 years, I've paid my parents' rent, utilities, insurance, and groceries every single month. Without fail. Without complaint. I covered medical expenses, car repairs, even Rachel's credit card debt a few times, because I was told we're family, we help each other. I never asked for thanks. I never made a scene. But last week, I needed something. One night of help. 1. My wife had a business trip. I had a career-defining project. I called and asked if they could watch our daughter. My mother laughed. Literally laughed. "We're not your servants," she said. And that night, I stopped by to drop off a peace offering, only to find them babysitting Rachel's kids, because she had a headache. I realized then, I wasn't a son. I was a service. So I stopped the service. And this is the part they don't want you to hear. I hit post and closed my laptop. Didn't even check it again until the next morning. When I did, my notifications were lit up like a Christmas tree. Hundreds of comments. Dozens of shares. Messages from old classmates, coworkers, even my own distant relatives. Wow. This hit me in the gut. Same story, different family. Golden child syndrome is so real, and no one talks about it. You're not alone, man. You did the right thing. You didn't cut off your parents, you cut off the abuse. I wasn't expecting the support. Honestly, I thought I'd be torn apart. But instead, it felt like people were waiting for someone to say it out loud. That sometimes, family is the first place you learn to feel used. Some shared their own stories. One guy told me how his parents only called when their mortgage was late. Another woman explained how her sister was still treated like royalty after stealing from their mom, while she got guilt-tripped for moving out. And then, Rachel showed up. Of course she did. She couldn't help herself. "Can't believe you'd embarrass our family like this," she commented. "You're airing dirty laundry just because you didn't get your way for once." But this time, the audience wasn't on her side. They turned fast. "Girl, you didn't pay a dime and you're mad? Didn't your migraine require a babysitting team? It's not dirty laundry if he's been the one doing all the cleaning." Her comments kept coming, but they got drowned in a sea of people calling her out. She tried to sound calm, then sarcastic, then angry, the usual phases of someone losing control of a narrative they thought they owned. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. For the first time, the story was mine. And people actually listened. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the doorbell rang. Jessica was out with Lila, and I was halfway through folding laundry when I heard it. 3 knocks, too fast to be friendly. Something in my stomach shifted. I walked to the door, peeked through the peephole, and there they were. My parents. Standing on my front step like the last few weeks had been a misunderstanding, like they weren't the people who'd laughed in my face and tried to torch my name online. My mom's makeup was smudged. My dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. I opened the door, but only halfway. My mom burst into tears instantly, clutching her chest like she was auditioning for a soap opera. "Brandon," she sobbed, "thank God. We've been trying to reach you, why won't you answer your phone?" My dad stood behind her, rubbing the back of his neck like he was the one in pain. "We just want to talk," he said, eyes down. "About what?" I asked, voice even. "We're sorry," Mom rushed out. We didn't mean for things to get so messy. You've always been such a good son. We weren't thinking straight. It would have been almost believable if I hadn't spent 3 decades living with these people. She reached for my arm. I didn't move. We've been struggling, she said. Rachel's in trouble. She's behind on rent again. She's got the kids full-time now, and she can't work with her anxiety acting up. She needs support. There it was. Not we miss you. Not we're proud of you. Not even we're sorry for what we did to you. No. Just more of the same script. Rachel needs. You provide. Dad finally looked up at me, eyes tired, face sagging. It's just, you're good at this kind of thing. Handling pressure. You've always been stronger. Stronger. As in, you can carry more than her, so why wouldn't you? I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. I didn't speak. Didn't argue. Just listened. My mom started crying again, harder this time. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. We thought you'd cool off and you'd fix it like you always do. I didn't flinch. She sniffled, wiped her face, looked up at me with shaking lips. You can't really mean to cut us off forever. Brandon, we're your parents. I nodded slowly. And said nothing. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to prove. No guilt. No obligation. No fire in my chest trying to earn my place at their table. Just air. Just distance. Just truth. They didn't know it yet, but they had just walked into the calm before a storm they weren't ready for. And this time, I wasn't going to protect them from it. They stood there for what felt like forever, hoping silence would do what words hadn't. Then my dad spoke. I know we messed up, he said quietly, almost to himself. I remember when your grandfather stopped talking to us, it felt just like this. I tilted my head. Grandpa? He nodded, slow and weary. Yeah. He helped us out a lot in our early years. Always loaning money, fixing things, stepping in when we couldn't figure it out. Then one day, he just stopped. Said we were relying on him too much. My mom didn't say a word. She just stared at the ground like he'd let something slip. And he had. Because in that moment, I saw it for what it was. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This wasn't about a bad decision or a moment of weakness. This was a pattern. My grandfather helped them until he couldn't. Then he got cut off. I helped them until I couldn't. Then I got called selfish. It wasn't personal. It was a system. A family model built on quiet expectations, unspoken debts, and guilt weaponized as love. A legacy passed down not with pride, but with pressure. This wasn't about me, I said aloud, mostly to myself. This is just how you operate. They looked up, confused. I thought I wasn't good enough because I wasn't like Rachel, I continued. But it was never about favorites. It was about function. I functioned. I paid. I worked. So I got used. My mom's lips parted, maybe to defend herself. But I didn't give her the chance. You didn't lose a son, I said, voice calm. You lost your supply. And with that, I stepped back, closed the door slowly, and let it latch behind me. No slam. No goodbye. Just finality. A clean break from the system they'd hoped I'd never notice. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one left standing outside. I felt free. The sun was starting to dip low, turning the sky over Seattle a soft, smoky orange. I sat on a bench at Green Lake while Lila ran in crooked zigzags through the grass, chasing a butterfly that never stayed in one place for long. Her laughter carried in the breeze, light and untethered, like it had never heard the word duty or felt the ache of being second. Jessica sat beside me, sipping coffee, the warmth of her shoulder pressed gently into mine. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't running mental checklists. Wasn't bracing for the next guilt trip. Wasn't feeling like I owed anyone anything just to exist in their orbit. I was just there. Present. Grounded. Alive in a moment that didn't demand anything of me except to enjoy it. There's a kind of peace that doesn't come with closure. It comes with letting go, even if the other person never apologizes, even if the apology never would have meant anything anyway. That's what I had now. Not the peace they promised me if I just kept giving. Not the kind where you play along just to be invited. The real kind. The kind you earn when you finally tell the truth to yourself. I used to think boundaries were selfish. That walking away was abandonment. That being the good son meant staying, paying, absorbing. I thought if I just gave enough, they'd see me. Value me. Love me for more than what I could do. But the truth? Some people only love the version of you that benefits them. And when you stop performing that version, they grieve their loss by making you the villain. That's fine. Let them grieve. Because the version of me they knew, the one who stayed silent, who funded their comfort at the cost of his own sanity, that man's gone. And in his place is someone who knows that love without respect isn't love at all. Someone who knows that setting boundaries is not betrayal, it's survival. Someone who knows his worth isn't up for debate, especially by people who never tried to see it in the first place. And most importantly, someone who knows his daughter will never have to inherit the silence he was raised in. I watched Lila finally give up on the butterfly and come sprinting back toward me, hair tangled, cheeks flushed, arms open. I scooped her up, held her close, and smiled. Because this moment right here, is what family is supposed to feel like. Warm. Honest. Free. Sometimes, breaking the cycle means becoming the villain in someone else's story. But that's okay. Because peace doesn't come from being loved. It comes from being respected, by others, and by yourself. So now I'll ask you what I had to ask myself. If your family only shows up when they need something. If they love what you give, but never who you are. If they celebrate your silence but punish your truth. Would you still call that love? Would you stay? Or would you walk away to protect your peace, even if it meant being the villain in their story? Let me know in the comments. Because I think a lot more of us have been there than we're willing to admit. And maybe it's time we start talking about it. And if this story spoke to something inside you, if it made you feel seen, or understood, or just a little less alone, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We tell these stories not just to revisit pain, but to reclaim power. Because the more we speak, the more we break the silence, for ourselves, and for someone out there still trapped in it. Together, we can create a world where dignity isn't something you earn with sacrifice, it's something you're honored for just by existing. Thank you for being here. We'll see you in the next story.